Rain battered the windows of Montgomery Financial Group's glass tower as Jennifer Hayes shut down her desktop and swept the last of her things into her worn leather bag. Her mind was already sprinting through the evening's schedule. Pick up 6-year-old Tyler from after-school care, swing by the grocery store, dinner, homework, bath, bedtime stories. Reset and repeat. The list never ended when you were a single mom and an executive assistant at one of Boston's most elite investment firms. She checked the time and cursed under her breath. 10 minutes late already. Little Scholar's daycare charged $5 for every minute past 6, and this month's asthma prescriptions had eaten what little spare cash she had. Another late fee would mean something else didn't get paid. She hurried into the elevator, rode down from the 42nd floor, and dashed through the lobby into the pouring rain. It wasn't until she was crawling along the Mass Pike in Friday traffic that her stomach dropped. Her laptop, the silver MacBook, sitting right where she'd left it on her desk. Panic surged. The computer held the presentation she'd spent 3 weeks perfecting for Monday's critical client meeting. Months of research, late nights hunched over spreadsheets after Tyler finally fell asleep. Her one shot at proving she deserved the senior assistant promotion. $20,000 more a year. Enough to get them out of the cramped one-bedroom in Dorchester. Enough for better healthcare for Tyler. Enough to breathe. She couldn't turn around. It was already 6:15. Little Scholars closed at 6:30 sharp. No exceptions. The presentation wasn't backed up anywhere. She'd meant to sync to the cloud, had even put it on her to-do list. There was never enough time. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Running late. 5 minutes away, she texted Melissa at Little Scholars when she hit a red light, fingers shaking. She screeched into the daycare lot at 6:28 and sprinted through the rain. Tyler sat on a chair in the lobby corner, backpack at his feet, calmly coloring. He looked up and his whole face brightened. "Mama!" Jennifer's heart clenched. He'd learned patience too young. "Hey, buddy." She dropped to her knees and pulled him into a hug, breathing in strawberry shampoo and crayons. "How was your day? I made you a picture." He held up a crayon drawing. 2 stick figures, one big, one small, hand in hand under a rainbow. "That's you and me when we go to the beach someday." They'd never been to the beach. She couldn't afford time off, let alone a vacation. "It's beautiful," she said, blinking back tears. "We're putting it on the fridge the second we get home." The evening slipped into its usual controlled chaos. Chicken nuggets and steamed broccoli. Fast and guaranteed Tyler would eat. Homework at the wobbly kitchen table while Jennifer's mind kept circling her abandoned laptop. Bath time, splashing that left the bathroom floor soaked. Tyler's laughter echoing off peeling paint. 2 chapters of their Knight and Dragon story. By 8:30, he was asleep, small chest rising and falling evenly. Jennifer lingered in the doorway of the tiny bedroom they shared. His twin bed pushed against one wall, her mattress on the floor, and let the worry close in. Monday's meeting was everything. Mr. Montgomery had personally asked her to lead the pitch to the Henderson Group. It was a test, she knew, to see if she could handle the senior role. Without her laptop, she had nothing. No backup, no cloud, no time Monday morning before the 8:30 meeting. She collapsed onto their sagging thrift store couch, exhaustion and panic battling for space. She clawed so hard to get here. Tyler's father had walked out 2 weeks before he was born, leaving her with a swollen belly, a part-time job and a stack of bills. She'd finished a business degree online while working full-time and caring for a newborn. She'd taken every extra shift, volunteered for every task, become indispensable. And now it might all fall apart because she'd walked out without her computer. The knock at her apartment door at 9:15 jolted her upright. No one ever knocked. She had no family in Boston, and friends with kids and 2 jobs didn't casually drop by. The knock came again, more insistent. Jennifer moved quietly to the door and peered through the peephole. Her breath caught. Standing in the dim, chipped hallway of her run-down building, rainwater dripping from his charcoal suit, was Christopher Montgomery. The Christopher Montgomery, billionaire CEO of Montgomery Financial Group. Her boss's boss's boss. Magazine cover material, owner of 3 homes and a yacht, the kind of man who lived in a different universe than single moms in Dorchester. And he was holding her laptop. Her hands shook as she unlatched the door. She cracked it open, acutely aware of her faded yoga pants and oversized MIT sweatshirt. "Mr. Montgomery," she managed, barely audible. He was taller than he looked in photographs. Dark hair threaded with silver at the temples. Steel gray eyes. At 42, he had the effortless presence of a man born to command a room. But what struck her most was the softness in his expression. "Miss Hayes," he said, voice low and warm despite the chill. "I believe you forgot something important." He held out the MacBook. Jennifer stared at it like a mirage. How did you?" "I was working late," he said. "I saw it on your desk. You mentioned the Henderson presentation during the executive briefing this week." His gaze flicked past her shoulder, taking in the cramped living room. "I assumed you'd want it for the weekend." A dozen questions fought for space, but the one that slipped out surprised her. "You know where I live?" Something unreadable crossed his eyes. "HR records," he said. "I hope that's not too intrusive. I wanted to be sure you had everything you needed." She reached for the laptop, fingers brushing his. The contact sent a sharp, unexpected jolt through her. "Thank you," she said quickly, clutching the computer to her chest. "You have no idea what this means." "That presentation is excellent," he cut in. "I reviewed it this afternoon. Your analysis of the European market trends was particularly perceptive." Heat rushed to her cheeks. The CEO had read her work. "Really read it?" "Mama." Tyler's sleepy voice drifted from the bedroom. "Who's there?" Jennifer flinched. "I'm sorry, I should—" "Of course," Christopher said at once, already retreating a step. But his attention had shifted, his jaw tightening slightly. "Your son?" "Yes," she said. "He had a nightmare last week, so he's been—" "Why am I explaining this?" she thought. "Thank you again, Mr. Montgomery. This was incredibly kind." He looked at her for a heartbeat too long, and she thought she saw loneliness in those cool gray eyes. Then the mask came back down. "Have a good weekend, Miss Hayes," he said. "I'll see you Monday." She closed the door and leaned back against it, pulse racing. Through the thin walls she heard footsteps fade down the stairs, then an engine start. Something expensive, she was sure, and European. Christopher Montgomery had driven to Dorchester on a rainy Friday night to hand-deliver her laptop. None of it made sense. The weekend blurred into presentation rehearsals and unanswerable questions. HR forms didn't list home addresses. She'd filled them out herself. Emergency contacts and phone numbers, yes, but nothing more. So how had he found her? And why had the CEO of a multibillion-dollar firm not only read an assistant's slides, but personally driven across the city in the rain? Sunday night, once Tyler was asleep, Jennifer stood before the bathroom mirror and ran through her pitch yet again. Concealer couldn't fully hide the dark circles under her eyes. Her best suit, a navy blazer and pencil skirt she'd hunted down at a consignment shop, hung pressed and ready on the door. Tomorrow would make or break everything. Her thoughts kept circling back to that moment at the door. The way Christopher's eyes had changed when Tyler called out. The crack in the iron image she'd seen 100 times in articles calling him the Shark of Wall Street and finance's most ruthless closer. Those profiles talked about his empire, his philanthropy, his status as one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. They never mentioned a man who looked almost human in a dingy hallway. Monday unfolded with military precision. Jennifer dropped Tyler at daycare by 7:15, was at her desk by 7:45, and had the conference room half set up when her supervisor, Patricia Wu, blew in like a storm. "The Henderson reps are early," Patricia said without preamble. "They're in the executive lounge already. Mr. Montgomery wants to start in 10 minutes instead of 30. Jennifer's stomach lurched, but she nodded. "I'm ready." "You'd better be," Patricia said, though her tone held grudging respect. "This is a $40 million account. The senior assistant role depends on it." For the next 2 hours everything narrowed to the click of the projector, the weight of eyes on her, the rhythm of her voice. She walked the Henderson Group through her analysis, market volatility, European regulatory shifts, tailored investment strategies. She fielded pointed questions from 3 severe men in their 60s, all expensive suits and skeptical expressions, and watched those expressions gradually soften. Patricia actually smiled when the meeting wrapped with firm handshakes and talk of signing by week's end. "Outstanding work, Jennifer," she said. "Truly." "Thank you," Jennifer replied, gathering her papers, hyper-aware of the man at the head of the table who hadn't said much but had watched her like a laser the entire time. Every time she'd risked a glance at Christopher, that same awareness from Friday night had crackled in the air. "Ms. Hayes." "A moment," he said as she reached the door. Patricia shot her a knowing look and slipped out. Jennifer turned back, alone with him for the first time since he'd stood dripping in her hallway. "Sir." He rose and came around the table, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd long since learned he owned every room he entered. "That was impressive," he said. "You read the room, adjusted in real time. Not everyone can do that." "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery," she said, keeping her voice carefully neutral despite the pounding in her chest. "Christopher," he corrected quietly. "When it's just us, call me Christopher." She blinked. "I don't think that's appropriate." A hint of a smile touched his mouth. "Probably not. But I'm getting tired of hearing Mr. Montgomery every third sentence." Before she could respond, his expression sobered. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Showing up at your home unannounced was presumptuous." "You saved my career," Jennifer said honestly. "Without that laptop, I couldn't have prepared properly. I owe you everything." "You owe me nothing," he said, tone firm. "Your work speaks for itself. I just returned what was yours. At 9 o'clock on a Friday in the rain to Dorchester," she said before she could bite the words back. "Billionaire CEOs don't usually make personal deliveries." That flicker again in his eyes. The vulnerability. "Maybe this one had his reasons," he said. The air felt charged. Dangerous. She knew she should leave. Maintain the boundary. Pretend there was nothing strange about her CO standing inches away, smelling like understated cologne and rain. Instead she heard herself ask, "What reasons?" He studied her for a long moment, as though weighing how much of himself to show. "Your son," he said finally. "How old is he?" The question caught her off guard. "Tyler's 6. "Why?" "I heard him call for you," Christopher said. "Through the door." His hands slipped into his pockets. Some of his commanding presence faded, replaced by something tentative. "It reminded me of someone." Jennifer waited. "I had a son," he said at last. "Daniel. He would have been 7 this year." The past tense hit her like a blow. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm so." "He died when he was 3. Christopher's voice stayed even, but grief carved deep lines around his eyes. "Leukemia. My ex-wife and I divorced 6 months later. Some marriages don't survive that kind of loss." Jennifer's throat burned. She thought about every time Tyler's chest had tightened, every frantic drive to urgent care, every night spent listening for wheezing. She couldn't even imagine the finality of what Christopher had lived through. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't imagine." "No one can," he said quietly. "Until they have to." His gaze met hers stripped bare. "When I saw your laptop on your desk, I noticed the file name. Tyler's Future Fund." She flushed. She hadn't expected anyone to see that tiny act of hope. The promotion. The raise. "It's for him," she said. "So he'll have choices I didn't." "You went to MIT," he said. "Full scholarship according to your file. That's not exactly short on opportunity." "I grew up in foster care," she said before she could stop herself. She almost never said those words out loud. 12 different homes between 4 and 18. MIT was the way out, but I still worked 3 jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't. Tyler's father left before he was born. It's been me and him for 6 years. Respect softened his features. "You're remarkable," he said. "I'm a survivor," she corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" he asked, stepping just a little closer. Close enough that his cologne and the starch of his shirt cut through the generic office air. "I think remarkable people often don't realize they are." Her breath hitched. This was reckless. He was her boss. Men like him did not pursue women like her. That was the stuff of bad romance novels, not real life. "I should go," she said firmly. "Tyler's daycare expects you at 6, Christopher finished. It's barely noon, Jennifer. Her name in his mouth sent another unwanted shiver down her spine. Mr. Montgomery, have lunch with me, he said. Silence stretched between them, humming. I can't, she said. People will talk. It would be complicated. Complicated, he agreed. I know. But for the first time in 4 years, I find I don't particularly care about complications. Her rational brain screamed, run. But the part that remembered his eyes on her slides, his car in her crumbling parking lot, his voice when he talked about Daniel, that part wavered. One lunch, he said quietly. Off-site. Private. 2 people having a conversation. Why? She asked, needing to hear it. Why me? He answered without looking away. Because when you opened your door Friday night, you didn't see my money or my reputation, he said. You saw a man holding something you needed. And when your son called for you, you didn't try to impress me or prolong the moment. You went to him. In my world, Jennifer, that kind of authenticity is rare. Against her better judgment, she said yes. They went to a tiny Italian place in the North End, far from the financial district. Christopher drove them in a low-key black sedan, high-end, but not the flashy sports car she'd subconsciously expected. Over pasta and wine that likely cost more than her weekly grocery bill, they talked. Really talked. He asked about her childhood, MIT, the job she'd worked. Babysitter, cashier, overnight stalker. About her dreams for Tyler. He listened as though none of it bored him, as though her life, which had always felt so ordinary and so hard, interested him. In return, he spoke about Daniel. A little boy obsessed with dinosaurs who refused anything green on his plate. 18 months of chemotherapy in hospital corridors and bargaining with any power that would listen. The moment he'd felt his son's fingers go limp in his. I threw myself into work after, he said, staring into his glass. 14 16-hour days. It was easier than going home to an empty house. The marriage was over long before we signed papers. Success became a distraction. But not enough, Jennifer said quietly. No, he looked up. I've spent 4 years building an empire and feeling nothing. Then on Friday I saw your laptop on your desk and thought about you, racing to daycare. How you'd feel when you realized you'd left it. I wanted to help. Not because it was a smart corporate move. Because I wanted you not to be afraid. Her heart hammered. Christopher, I need to be clear, she said. I can't afford drama. Tyler comes first. I need this job, this promotion. If anyone at the office finds out, they won't, he said, voice firm. I'll make sure of it. And I'm not asking you to choose between your son and this. I would never do that. Then what are you asking? She whispered. He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers. The touch was light and incendiary all at once. For a chance, he said. To see if what I felt Friday night was real. To know if you felt it too. She could lie. She'd learned how when social workers asked how things were, and the honest answer was, awful. But this time she didn't. I felt it, she admitted. And it terrifies me. The next 3 months were measured in stolen hours and careful lines. They were scrupulously professional at work. No lingering looks in meetings, no closed-door conversations that could be misconstrued. Her promotion to senior executive assistant went through with a glowing recommendation from Patricia and HR's blessing. The raise was framed and truly was entirely about performance. Outside the office, the boundaries blurred. Christopher took her to restaurants well outside Boston, to quiet museums after hours where his name opened doors, to a private stretch of Cape Cod beach where Tyler built elaborate sandcastles while Christopher knelt in the sand beside him, talking about tides and crabs and why the ocean seemed to breathe. He never pushed. Never made her feel indebted. He learned Tyler's favorite stories, his allergies, the way he needed his inhaler at the first sign of a wheeze. He learned how Jennifer took her tea, the old scars her foster homes had left, the way she still instinctively flinched at sudden anger. She learned that beneath the headlines and hard edges he was kind. He carried an ocean of guilt over Daniel. He believed he'd failed as a father and husband, and that no amount of money could balance that ledger. Jennifer moved her and Tyler into a slightly nicer 2-bedroom in Cambridge, closer to good schools and a short walk from a children's clinic. The extra space felt like a miracle. Tyler finally had his own room. She felt almost stable. And she was falling in love with a man she had never expected to even meet, which was exactly when everything blew apart. They were working late on a massive acquisition one night when a knock sounded on Christopher's office door. "Come in," he called, not looking up. Patricia stepped in, looking uncharacteristically rattled. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone insisting on seeing you, Christopher. She says it's urgent." "I don't have any meetings scheduled," he said, frowning. She wouldn't take no for an answer. A woman appeared behind Patricia, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. She was gorgeous, tall, blonde, in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Jennifer's monthly rent. But it was the naked hope on her face that twisted Jennifer's stomach. "Chris," the woman said, voice trembling, "I need to talk to you. It's about Daniel." Christopher was on his feet so fast his chair rolled back. "Victoria? What are you?" "I know this sounds insane," she said, tears spilling. "But I saw him. Chris, I saw our son. He's alive." The words detonated between them. Color drained from Christopher's face. He gripped the desk as if the floor had shifted. "That's not possible," he said hoarsely. "Daniel died. We buried him." "I thought so too." Victoria's voice broke. "But I saw him at a clinic in Cambridge 2 days ago. Same little birthmark on his left shoulder. Same cowlick. He looked just like," she choked on a sob. "He's 7, Chris. Exactly the age Daniel would be." Jennifer's knees felt weak. She knew that clinic. She'd been there with Tyler. "Where?" Christopher demanded. "What clinic?" She named it. Jennifer's heart skipped. 3 blocks from her new place. "I followed them," Victoria said. "The boy and his mother. I got the license plate. I hired a private investigator. His name is Lucas. Lucas Brennan. He was adopted as an infant." "An infant?" Christopher whispered. "Daniel was 3 when we buried him," Victoria finished. "But what if something happened at the hospital? What if there was a mistake? Or something worse?" Silence throbbed in the room. "I need proof," Christopher said at last, voice shifting into that hard, decisive register Jennifer knew from boardroom battles. "DNA. Records. Something." "The investigator is working on it," Victoria said. "But Chris, I know my son. I carried him. I know every inch of him. That boy is Daniel." Jennifer watched the man she'd come to know unravel. Hope warred with raw terror in his eyes. For years of fragile acceptance threatened by the idea that his son might be alive, and stolen. "I should go," Jennifer said quietly, already gathering her things. She did not belong in this moment. Christopher seemed to remember her only when he looked up, startled. "Jennifer, you need time with Victoria," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I'll reschedule your morning meetings." She left before Victoria could ask who she was, before the dam behind her eyes could break. In the elevator, she finally let herself crumble, fingers pressed hard against her mouth. Christopher's son might be alive. His ex-wife was back. Whatever fragile thing had been growing between them couldn't possibly stand beside that. By the time she reached her car, her phone buzzed. "Please don't disappear. I need you." But Jennifer had survived worse than heartbreak. She knew how to let go of things she couldn't keep. He needed answers. He needed Victoria. He needed maybe his old life back. She picked up Tyler from after-school care, hugged him a little too tightly, and reminded herself that she'd built something solid for the two of them long before Christopher walked into her life. She could do it again. That night, once Tyler was asleep, she sat on the tiny balcony of their Cambridge apartment and cried harder than she had in years. Not just for Christopher, but for the small bright hope she'd allowed herself, that someone might choose her, stay, build a life with her and her son. The next morning, Christopher's office was empty. An assistant from the executive floor, someone Jennifer barely knew, told her Mr. Montgomery had taken personal leave for family matters. No return date. Rumors spread through Montgomery Financial like wildfire. Secret illness, scandal, a mysterious European deal. Jennifer said nothing. She added this new secret to the stash she'd carried her whole life and got back to work. 2 weeks crawled by. She arrived early, stayed late, volunteered for every project Patricia offered. At home, she doubled down on being present for Tyler math worksheets, board games, bedtime stories. But a hollow place inside her ached. Christopher owed her nothing, she reminded herself. Their relationship had been brief, unofficial, fragile. Of course he'd prioritized the possibility of his son. But the silence still hurt. 3 weeks after Victoria's appearance, on a gray Thursday evening, Jennifer walked into the parking garage and stopped short. Christopher leaned against her beat-up Honda Civic, hands in his coat pockets. He looked thinner, exhausted. There were new lines around his mouth and shadows beneath his eyes. But there was also something steadier in his gaze. Something like acceptance. "Christopher," she breathed. "What?" "He's not Daniel," Christopher said quietly. "The boy Victoria saw, Lucas Brennan, we did the DNA test. He's not my son." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God. I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be." It was crushing. But it also gave me something I didn't know I needed. He stepped closer. Closure. She searched his face and saw it. The grief still there, but settled. No longer suspended in that terrible in-between. "Victoria and I talked," he continued. "Really talked. We realized we'd both been carrying this hidden hope that somehow the doctors were wrong, that there'd been a mistake. Seeing Lucas forced us to accept what happened. Daniel is gone, Jennifer. He's been gone for 4 years. If I keep living half alive, I'm not honoring his memory. I'm just stuck." Tears blurred her vision. "You deserve peace. I'm glad you found some. I disappeared on you," he said, guilt threading his words. "I shut down, ran to deal with the past, and I left you without any explanation. You didn't deserve that. You were facing the impossible," she said, even though saying it cracked something inside. "Your ex-wife, the chance your son was alive. Of course that took priority. Did you really understand?" he asked, closing the last of the distance. He lifted his hand, brushing his thumb gently along her cheek. "Because for 3 weeks, every time I pictured any kind of future, you and Tyler were in it." Her breath stuttered. "Jennifer, I love you," he said. Simple. Steady. "I'm in love with you. With your strength, with the way you love your son, with the way you make me want to be more than what I've been. I know it's messy. I know our positions complicate everything. I know it scares you. But I'm asking you to take a chance on us anyway." Objections tumbled through her mind. The power imbalance, office gossip, the risk of losing not just him but her job if it imploded. But then other images surfaced. Christopher on the Cape, laughing as Tyler buried his feet in the sand. Late nights talking until her guard slipped, and she found herself telling him things she'd never voiced to anyone. Tyler asking over and over, "When is Mr. Chris coming again?" She'd spent her life surviving. Maybe it was time to try actually living. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been terrified to say it. But I do." Relief and joy broke over his face like sunlight. He pulled her into a kiss that was all tenderness and apology and promise. When they finally separated, both were laughing and crying. "So what now?" she asked, breathless. "You're still my boss. I still need this job." "None of that changed." "You're being transferred," Christopher said, a hint of mischief returning. "Patricia has been promoted to VP of Operations. You're moving to Director of Strategic Planning, reporting to the CFO instead of to me. Same floor. Bigger office. $30,000 raise. The board signed off this afternoon." Her eyes widened. "You can't just—" "I didn't," he cut in. "Patricia recommended you based on the last 6 months. The CFO interviewed you for that cross-functional project, remember? He asked for you. I recused myself from anything to do with the decision. This isn't a favor, Jennifer. This is your work being recognized. All I did was encourage efficiency in the process." Her chest ached in the best way. He'd thought through every angle. Her independence, her reputation, the ethics. "There's one more thing," Christopher said, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I want to meet Tyler. Really meet him. Not as your boss stopping by. As the man who loves his mother and wants to be part of his life, if you'll both let me." "He asks about you all the time," she admitted. "I think he might be a little in love with you himself." "Then we'll take it slow," Christopher said. "Carefully. No sudden changes. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I just want a chance. 6 months later, Jennifer stood by the tall windows of a Beacon Hill townhouse, hers now as much as Christopher's, and watched them in the private garden. Christopher jogged beside Tyler, one hand on the back of a too-big bicycle. Tyler pedaled furiously, wobbling, laughing, cheeks flushed. "Mama, look!" he yelled as he coasted briefly on his own. Christopher caught him just before he tipped, both of them shouting triumphantly. The path here hadn't been smooth. Office gossip had flared hot until Jennifer's transfer became official, and her work silenced most of the whispers. Christopher's social circle had needed time to adjust to the idea that their friend, the billionaire, was serious about a single mom from Dorchester. Victoria had surprised her most. She'd sent Jennifer a handwritten note thanking her for helping Christopher step back into the land of the living. The gesture had made Jennifer cry in the break room. They'd done counseling, family therapy sessions to help Tyler navigate the changes, individual sessions to help Christopher and Jennifer untangle their old wounds. Jennifer had insisted on keeping her own bank account and paying her share of some expenses. Christopher had grumbled, then backed down, understanding that for her, independence wasn't about money. It was about survival instincts she couldn't just switch off. Her phone buzzed on the side table. "Board meeting went perfectly. That European expansion proposal you drafted was brilliant. Drinks Friday to celebrate your genius?" Patricia Jennifer smiled. Under the CFO's mentorship, she discovered she had a real gift for long-term strategy. Last month she'd spoken at a Women in Finance conference about career advancement as a single mother. Behind her the door opened. "Mom, I almost didn't fall," Tyler yelled, barreling in. "Which is the technical definition of success," Christopher added dryly, following him. Both were sweaty and grinning. He came up behind Jennifer, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "I have something to ask you," he said quietly. Tyler bounced in place, sensing excitement. Christopher reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a diamond ring, beautiful but not flashy, just like everything he'd chosen for her since the beginning. "Jennifer Hayes," he said, voice soft but steady. "You've shown me that there is life after loss. That love can find you in the most unexpected places. That family is something you build, not something you're simply born into. Will you marry me?" Her hands trembled. She looked from the ring to Christopher's hopeful face to Tyler's wide, shining eyes. "Say yes, Mama," Tyler burst out. "Then Mr. Chris can be my real dad." A laugh broke through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Of course yes." Christopher slid the ring onto her finger, then scooped Tyler up so all three of them could hug at once. For the first time in her life, Jennifer felt something solid and permanent click into place. Not because a billionaire had swept in and fixed everything, but because she'd let someone in who saw her fully and loved her exactly as she was. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony overlooking the ocean, the same Cape Cod beach where Christopher had first helped Tyler build sandcastles. Victoria came, bringing one of Daniel's favorite toy dinosaurs as a gift. The simple plastic figure in Christopher's hand made both of them weep, but in a way that felt healing, not hollow. Tyler served as ring bearer, solemn and proud, telling everyone who would listen that he was getting the best dad ever. 6 months after the wedding, Christopher formally adopted him. Tyler Brennan Hayes Montgomery declared it, "the best day of my whole life," loudly and repeatedly. Jennifer never again forgot her laptop at the office, but she was forever grateful she had that one Friday night. Because that single exhausted mistake had shifted the trajectory of her entire life. Toward love, toward stability, toward a kind of happiness she'd once believed was reserved for other people. Years later, in her home office, now bearing the title Vice President of Strategic Development on the door, Jennifer glanced up from a report. Outside in the garden, Christopher walked slowly backward, arms outstretched, coaxing their toddler daughter toward him. Caroline, named after his mother, wobbled, then took a few determined steps, collapsing into his arms with a delighted squeal. From the living room came the sound of piano practice. Tyler, now older, working through a piece with the same stubborn focus his mother brought to quarterly forecasts. Jennifer watched them, her family, and understood something that had taken her a lifetime to learn. She had never really needed rescuing. What she'd needed was someone who saw the strength it took to survive the life she'd had, and loved her for it. Someone who understood that the best partnerships aren't about one person saving the other, but about two whole people choosing again and again to become better together. Christopher looked up from the lawn, caught her watching, and smiled. The same smile he'd given her in a rundown hallway in Dorchester, softer now, richer. She smiled back, hand resting over the ring on her finger. In the end, she thought that was the real fairy tale. Not the billionaire, not the townhouse, not the title on her business card. The miracle was that she'd allowed herself to believe she deserved this. Love. Family. A life built not on fear but on choice. And she would never ever forget the night a forgotten laptop had brought all of it to her door.